that to be tapped into by providing legal status. And the other is what I call a host community. They took a host community approach to managing migration. Understanding that the social and fiscal burden falls on local communities where migrants arrive. And they decided to support the communities rather than just or even principally the migrants who were arriving. So you weren't fueling social tension by providing, quote unquote, special benefits to the new residents of Barranquilla or Bogotá, but rather to the communities that were becoming their new homes. And obviously, if you're supporting those communities, you are also supporting their new residents. But doing that together, I think, allowed kind of a social permission structure to take hold, and allowed folks, again, to become new residents of those communities, and to become contributors to those communities in a way that is, again, it's not perfect. Xenophobia is present in Colombia and elsewhere in the Americas, but has been tempered in a moment, in a decade, where you have seen unprecedented mobility in the Americas, because again, 25 to 30% of global mobility is taking place in Latin America and the Caribbean, which is home to only 8% of the world's population.
Thank you. I think that's so interesting, talking about contribution and support for communities as key to kind of buying political consent for really those absolutely extraordinary number of migrants that Latin America is hosting at the moment. So, Frank Sherry.
Hello.
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 Immigration has been cited as one of the major reasons behind Donald Trump's victory in the presidential election. And yet it's a very widely underappreciated fact that under the Biden-Harris administration, encounters with migrants at the US-Mexico border fell from a peak of 250,000 per month in December 2023 down to 30,000 a month by the time that Biden left office. You worked on the Harris campaign. Can you take us through that sort of extraordinary fact that, firstly, how did the administration achieve those numbers and yet not get political credit for it, Frank? I'm not blaming you, honestly.
Everybody want to watch heartbreak happen as we speak. The President Biden got the politics and policy of immigration wrong for 3.5 years. And by the time the Biden administration got it right, not so much because of him, but because of policy officials at the senior level who got together and cracked the code. So what they did is they combined meaningful international cooperation from Mexico and other countries in the Americas. Dan had a big role in that. They also made it very hard for people to cross the border illegally, to apply for asylum, so that they weren't just let into the country and put into 7-year backlogs, meaning they were never going to be removed. And they expanded legal pathways so that people could apply for refugee and humanitarian visas. The combination undermined the business model of the smugglers. It made much more sense for a Venezuelan to apply for a humanitarian visa, fly in an airplane into America, be met by a sponsor, and have work permission, than to pay $10,000 to go to the border, be turned away, and be unable to get into the United States under law for years. So the incentive structure shifted. And so I give credit to the White House officials who got it right. I don't think President Biden actually kind of got this issue instinctually, and it's a big problem. But I think we can learn something from it. Look, I've worked on this issue for 40 years in a variety of capacities, now as a think tanker, which is new to me. I think it means I can say whatever the hell I want. But the things that work, at least in an American context, are that you've got to take the issue seriously because the voters take the issue seriously. It's not just a right-wing issue. It's an issue for it was the number 2 issue in the election. And so when President Biden didn't want to talk about it because his advisors said it'll increase the salience of the issue. It's a Republican issue. Stay away from it. That ceded the narrative turf to Trump and the Republicans to define the issue. It was the Biden border crisis. It was the Democrats are the party of open borders. And with no countervailing, contesting narrative, that took hold among many voters. And while inflation and cost of living was the main issue in the election, the late-breaking voters, the swing voters who decided late, they favored Trump over Harris on immigration and border security by 42 points. So we end up with an authoritarian using an immigration crackdown as the edge of the spear in his authoritarian project, rather than having a sensible policy that comports with where most Americans are. So here are the three things that I think for America, to get for the center left to get immigration right, you've got to take the issue seriously. That's not to say make it the only issue, but don't pretend it's not an issue. I think we'll see an example of the next speaker showing that in the UK they're taking it seriously. They're leaning in. Right? Number two, you've got to solve the problem. All the messaging in the world doesn't work if you don't have a serious solution. And again, credit to the folks who brought solutions to bear in year 4 of the Biden administration, but it was too late to make an electoral difference. The majority of Americans want a balanced policy. This is what the contours of the debate are often a mobilized right slinging simplistic slogans to mobilize fear and hate, and dare I say, a shouty left advocating for maximalist demands that make the debate seem in the public mind as it's all or nothing. If it's a debate between all or nothing, nothing is going to win.
Every time.
If it's a debate between nothing, fear and hate, simplistic solutions, scapegoating and xenophobia, and a balanced approach that says we're going to be a nation of immigrants and a nation of laws, we're going to make illegal immigration work and work to sharply reduce illegal immigration, that's where the majority of people are. Americans aren't anti-immigrant, they're anti-chaos. And the border chaos drove Trump's electoral advantage in a way that really hurt Kamala Harris's campaign. So, and I learned so much yesterday by talking in some of our small group work with the Danes and the Spanish and the Swedes and the Australians. Every country has a different authentic story. But your authentic story has to be the basis for how you talk about this. In America, we're not an open borders country. We're a country that has long celebrated legal immigration and tried to deter illegal immigration. And when we tell that story of we're a nation of immigrants and a nation of laws, that's not some sort of tawdry trade-off. That is a statement of values. In fact, the best way to be either is to be both. They work together. Because when we have more control at our borders, we have more generosity for expanded legal pathways. So I think that the center-left has to find its voice on this in a way that is not intimidated by the left, not cowed by the right, and it's not aping either narrative. It's a center-left narrative that says we can solve this problem in a way, we can manage this problem in a way that reflects our values and serves our interests.
Thank you, Frank. We've just got a couple of minutes left. I'm just going to very quickly ask Diego and Lasse. Centre-left parties tend to struggle with immigration because they're often trying to hold together a coalition of older working-class voters with socially conservative views and often younger, more educated voters with socially liberal views. So just like 1 minute on how you've held that coalition together with the immigration policy that you have in Spain.
I totally get your points about this is an issue, so don't try to ignore it. But at the same time, I think one of the mistakes we are making in many places is that we are buying the idea that this is the only topic. So we are limited in the whole debate on this. And this, one of the effects that it has is it makes you forget how aligned you are in other issues with your allies, right? So I guess one of the ideas is keeping a coalition together is not easy, but we've been the first coalition government in the history of Spain, actually. And I guess the golden rule is start making friends among the ranks of the other parties, and then never lose focus of the things that unite you, and don't focus only on the things that divide you. And then, you know, in our case, as we were talking before, we have the luck that the opposition makes things much easier many days. So.
Thank you, Diego. And Lasse, very quickly.
Very quickly, I don't know. We are not one of those parties or governments who feel that this is the only issue. We've tried to and been able to mostly to neutralize this subject. The vast majority of the Danish voters are behind us, and there's a big majority in Parliament who supports these policies. So when we were a one-party government from 19 to 22, relying on the left on all other issues, they accepted that fact, and so they didn't overthrow the government due to their disagreement on those policies. And now we are in a coalition government with parties who also agree with this point. So I would say immigration is not only a financial thing. A major part of a vast part of our fiscal surplus comes from migrant workers from Eastern European countries. We welcome them. They behave, they work, they respect the law of the land. There's no problem in saying that, and we also do that. But if you are classical progressive and you tend to focus too much on the fiscal things, the redistribution, the financial things. But what about minimum wage? What about social coherency? You need to attend to all those factors if you don't want to lose the majority of the voters.
Thank you. So I think my conclusion is that centre-left parties do not have to be powerless in the face of this issue. We've got different political situations in different countries, and the answers will be different in all of those countries. But I think you made an excellent point right at the beginning that whatever the solution, the government needs to be authentic. They need to make clear choices that are in line with the values that they feel authentically comfortable with advocating. And I think, you know, if they do that, they can both shape conditions on the ground and be able to influence the political narrative and be able to give an answer to Donald Trump's challenge. So I'd just like to thank our excellent panel, and can we have a round of applause, please?
Thank you so much to our morning panellists. They've been really, really insightful. Well, we're now going to take a very quick reset, and we'll be back in a few minutes. So make the most of this time. Thank you. Welcome back, everyone. Well, our next speaker is Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Sir Keir Starmer. He needs no introduction here, but he comes to this summit at a real test for his leadership. 1 year into office, under pressure from Reform UK, and on the leave of Labour conference. Just this week, he sets out plans for digital ID cards for every UK adult, which has already sparked debate about control and civil liberties. So the question is, in the next week and the months ahead, how will the Prime Minister prove that progress means delivery and not just office? Prime Minister Starmer, welcome to the stage.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Good morning, and really good to see you. And Alita, thank you very much for that introduction. Thank you to all of you here for joining us today. And can I take this early opportunity to thank all of those that work behind the scenes to bring this event together and allow us this opportunity to discuss. So thank you very much to them. Now, this is a gathering of people bound by a common cause, the patriotic renewal of our nations, that is underpinned by the values of dignity and respect, equality and fairness, and the belief that social democratic means are the best way to pursue that goal. But it's also a room that puts paid to a story we often hear in the press these days, that somehow our politics is dying out. Now, yes, we are in an era of huge challenge, but we can take heart when we look around the world. In fact, we only need to look around this room. Kristrún from Iceland, Pedro from Spain, Mark Carney, who stormed to victory in Canada at the beginning of this year, followed by Albo in Australia, and of course Jonas in Norway just a few weeks ago. So in fact, pitted against our right-wing opponents, I'd say centre-left parties are having quite a year so far. And not forgetting, there is... Good morning, Pedro. We're just hailing you being here. But not forgetting, of course, the Labour Party's victory in July of last year, getting a landslide victory here in the United Kingdom. So I'm sorry, I don't accept that argument that somehow our politics is dying out. But I do accept that it is now time for Social Democrats to confront directly some of the challenges and some of the lies, frankly, that have taken root in our societies. Because we don't just hear these stories about our politics, we also hear stories about our great countries, our communities, our cities, that simply do not match the reality that we see around us. And it's very good to have you here in London. I hope you've enjoyed yourself here in our capital city. Maybe gone out for breakfast this morning, popped into the pub for a pint last night, maybe enjoyed the last rays of sunshine in our beautiful parks. And if you have done any of those things or other brilliant things in London, you may have noticed that this city isn't the wasteland of anarchy that some would have you believe. But that, in a sense, captures what we're up against, doesn't it? And there are versions in all of your countries where places, institutions, communities are portrayed in a way that is a million miles from reality. A sort of industrialised infrastructure of grievance, an entire world, not just a world view, created through our devices that is miserable, joyless, and demonstrably untrue. And yet, in another way, and this is the challenge, also totally cohesive. because it preys on real problems in the real world, identifies clear enemies. That's us, by the way. And at its heart, its most poisonous belief, and this was on full display here in London just under 2 weeks ago, that there's a coming struggle, a defining struggle, a violent struggle for the nation, for all of our nations. And you don't have to be a great historian to know where that kind of poison ends up. And you can just feel it in a language that is naked in its attempt to intimidate. Because it's not careless or accidental. It's part of a strategy. They want politics to be a choice between globalists and nationalists, to draw a dividing line between the elites and the people, in which somehow our rich story of patriotism and pride, our common cause with working people, our deep roots in the trade union movement in our communities, the desire and demand of working people for a voice in their future is claimed by those who have nothing in common with them or their values. Only a cynical intent to exploit their fears to benefit themselves. That is what we're up against. So we must show our politics, resolutely opposed to a status quo that doesn't deliver for working people. The worst thing we can do is to defend the status quo. It hasn't worked for working people. We must be determined to deliver change in their interests. Patriotic renewal, rooted in our own national stories, restoring pride where people live and work. We fight for our values, decency, tolerance, respect, and most importantly, we focus on the countries we can become through renewal. National renewal. Now, that's not a new argument for social democrats, but it is the beating heart of our politics, the nation state, harnessing the potential of the whole country, providing security and opportunity for working people, together squaring up to the challenges of a world that is frankly more dangerous, less secure than many of us have known in our lifetimes. We have to respond to that, not by turning inward, but with even deeper solidarity, alliances and partnerships built upon common values, the rules-based order that has kept the peace in our world since the last century. The coalition of the willing, strong not just because of the depth of our shared beliefs, but because we recognise that the security and safety of the people that we serve depends on our relationships, our willingness to stand up together across our different political traditions and not be cowed by tyranny. But to protect strength abroad, you do need security at home, economic stability, an approach to economic growth that can create wealth more fairly in the first place. Proud working-class towns and cities, so often disenchanted with mainstream politics because the economy does not work for them, and because that's been true for a very long time. And they're losing trust in our ability to deliver the change that they want to see. They don't want handouts or help. They want to stand on their own feet. I'll give you an example from the United Kingdom. Yesterday, we announced £5 billion to be spent by local people, however they see fit, in their communities, restoring a pub, reviving a community hall, reopening a youth club. But the important thing is not coming cap in hand to Whitehall to get the green light on a project, but actually allowing control to be with the communities where the funding is going, so they can choose what it's spent on, because those with skin in the game know what's best for their communities. It's about restoring control and agency, having the respect for working people to choose what's right for them. And that is how they stand proudly as partners in a social democratic nation. So our approach to the economy, investment, yes, of course, in everything from defence to energy, creating good, well-paid jobs. Industrial policy, yes, of course, our proud heritage of making things, relighting the fires and the factories across the country. In public services, absolutely, for all of us, from healthcare to transport, and financial prudence, which is non-negotiable. But it does also mean stripping out regulation so we can build more and build more quickly. And the private sector can create wealth in every community. Now, some people call this approach abundance. I have a different phrase for it, social democracy. But the way I see it, this is the defining political choice of our times. A politics of predatory grievance, preying on the problems of working people and using that infrastructure of division against the politics of patriotic renewal, rooted in communities, building a better country, brick by brick from the bottom up, including everyone in the national story. Difference under the same flag. Because wherever you are in the world, we all have our different national symbols. And what I'll say is this: we must fight for them. Stand up to those who tell us that there's a tension between our symbols of pride and symbols of inclusion, our multi-ethnic modern nation and our history and heritage. There is not. They are one and the same thing. That's the social democratic argument. It is a powerful one, and we must never surrender it. But of course, you need more than symbols for nation building. You also need renewal. And it's important to be really clear on this. Renewal is not just fixing problems in some managerial sense. That is important, of course it is. People are very disappointed with the pace of change in government. It's so much slower than almost every other facet of their lives. So we do have to speed up. Poor delivery is a threat to mainstream politics. But renewal is a deeper argument. It means demonstrating to working people that, as well as the economy, the state is being run in their interests. And that does mean we've got to look ourselves in the mirror and recognise where we've allowed our parties to shy away from people's concerns and let the politics of purity patronise people. Now, you will all have issues in your own countries, but in Britain, it's illegal migration. And I suspect that may be the same in a number of other countries. For too many years, it's been too easy for people to come here, slip into the shadow economy, and remain here illegally. Because, frankly, we've been squeamish about saying things that are clearly true. It's not just that it's not compassionate left-wing politics to rely on labour that exploits foreign workers and undercuts fair wages, but the simple fact that every nation needs to have control over its borders. We do need to know who is in our country. Our immigration system does need to be fair if we want to maintain that binding contract that our politics is built on. Otherwise, it undermines trust, undermines people's faith that we're on their side, and their belief that the state can and will work for them. And that is why today I am announcing this government will make a new free-of-charge digital ID mandatory for the right to work by the end of this Parliament. Let me spell that out. You will not be able to work in the United Kingdom if you do not have digital ID. It's as simple as that. Because decent, pragmatic, fair-minded people, they want us to tackle the issues that they see around them. And of course, the truth is, we won't solve our problems if we don't also take on the root causes, looking upstream to tackle poverty, conflict, climate change, Issues that aren't just intolerable for those of us who care about inequality and injustice wherever it's found in the world, but which have clear consequences for our own citizens. Take Russia's aggression in Ukraine. We all have a responsibility for the future of our continent, to stand tall where oppression and violence rears its head. But it is also about energy security, because Putin and other tyrants have used their control over energy supplies as a threat. They've pushed up energy bills, threatened to keep doing so unless they get their way. And that's why we're investing in our own energy, sovereign control over our own future, whether that's nuclear, wind, solar power. Now, this will create good jobs, but it will also take the boot of tyrants like Putin off our throat. So our mission to become a clean energy superpower is about future-proofing energy supply, bringing energy bills down and protecting the planet that we all live on, doing right by our values and by our countries and our citizens. Because in this era, we must be the nation builders. We must be the patriots in our countries. We must show working people that we, and only we, can deliver the pride and belonging they seek. Their communities strong, cohesive, changed for the better, taking control of our future, tackling the big challenges, whether that's climate change or illegal migration, not shying away from them. That is how we win. That is how we rebuild. That's how renewal defeats grievance. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for being here. I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. I need the rest of our panel. Right.
Thank you so much. My name is Neera Tandon, and I'm the president of the Center for American Progress Action Fund, and we are so excited to co-host this day and really thrilled to be here with such incredible leaders from around the world. I want to thank Prime Minister Starmer for his words of inspiration and strength of resolve, and for being with us at the Global Progress Action Conference. And of course, it's my great honor to welcome Prime Ministers Mark Carney of Canada, Anthony Albanese of Australia, and Kristian Frostadottir of Finland. Iceland. I'm so sorry. Oh my God, it's so embarrassing. I'm thrilled to join you all for this conversation. We're living, and this is a really crucial moment because we are living in a new political moment. And as we all face rising authoritarianism and essentially significant disruption under the guise of change, we have leaders here who are addressing the challenges of their countries, people who are addressing the economic insecurities, addressing basic needs, meeting the moment without inducing fear, but inducing hope. And so as we face these challenges, we're thrilled to have these leaders here. And I'll just get right into the questions. Your respective electoral and policy victories. We have leaders here assembled who've all won election in the last year and a half. These have been points of inspiration for the progressive movement, for center-left parties, and for really democracy defenders around the world. And I'd love for you to share with us, how your messages, how that resonated, and how you are meeting the needs of your constituencies, people who are deeply concerned with cost of living and other issues. Mark Carney, please take it away. Mr. Prime Minister.
I see. That was introduction, discuss. Okay, so I will go. Thank you, Neera. Thank you. This is fantastic to be at this gathering. So maybe I'll frame it a bit this way, which is our election and what Canadians were feeling, like in many electorates, but in a slightly different way, is a sense of loss of control. That's what happens when inflation is too high, and that's what happens when there is a sense that migration isn't being adequately managed. It's also what happened, and the most sharp version of this was, of course, the tariff relationship with the United States, when all of a sudden our largest trading partner was fundamentally changing the relationship. So our election and our policy was first and foremost, it was fight the tariffs, have a reaction. We had one of the strongest reactions. Protect our workers. So there were many ways we were doing that, but one of the things is we were taking all of the tariff revenue, putting it back into workers, helping workers retain their jobs, but also retrain, protect our communities against crime. But the core, the core message was build. And it was to build and build in a positive way. You need a positive agenda, and it matters how we build. And I'll just leave you with a couple of core messages that ground our approach in the election, but very much in governing. First and foremost, we can give ourselves more than any foreign government can take away. So our ability to have one Canadian economy, we have a bunch of internal trade barriers, we're removing all of those. Our ability to build for the future new trade corridors, clean energy, artificial intelligence, diversify with partners, all of that is much greater than what could be taken away, even in the worst tariff scenario. So you have a positive element to that. The second thing that we emphasize is how we build. So we build as a nation. We build, first and foremost, thinking about workers. So the message to Canadians has been, we are going to create not hundreds of thousands of jobs, but hundreds of thousands of careers in the skilled trades and other skilled areas, and setting up in parallel with major projects and investments, apprenticeships, skilled training, so that Canadians are ready to take advantage of that. Last point, we have historic issues that are current issues in terms of reconciliation with Indigenous Canadians, Indigenous peoples, and the nature of the major investments we're doing is that there will always be Indigenous participation in the equity, in the ownership, in the building. So it's a progressive element, thinking back into workers and being inclusive with all groups and societies, with a core positive message on build. People want and deserve that positive agenda, so it's not engaging on the turf of the more negative agenda, but focusing on the positive.
Thank you so much for that. We're going to return to the theme of rebuilding. But Prime Minister Albanese, in your time in office, you had a historic election, really one of the first times in a long time, re-elected. And how are you seeing this year? How are you meeting the needs of your constituents, of Australians, in this time of rapid change globally?
A big contrast in our campaign, I think, was we had a positive agenda. And there were two themes we kept going back to make a positive difference to people's lives. No one held back and no one left behind. So no one left behind, that a Labor government will always look after the vulnerable, will look after people on issues like gender equity. What we'd done was to, for example, real wages increasing. We've had, every year we've been in office, the minimum wage has been increased at a level at least or higher than inflation. So we've seen wages share of GDP go up for the first time in a long while, for example. We have, since the election, protected penalty rates. We have introduced superannuation to paid parental leave, and we're extending that out to 6 months paid parental leave. And we have that agenda in terms of equity, but no one held back is about aspiration as well. Progressive parties have to be the party of success as well. So engagement with business, engagement with job creation, new industries. How do we seize the opportunities from the clean energy transformation to create new industries, new jobs, as well as enhance blue-collar jobs which are there as well. So we have an agenda, a Future Made in Australia agenda, which is about value-adding, not just digging things up, resources, which has been a traditional strength, and exporting them, but how do we value-add in Australia, create those blue-collar jobs, so it's connected up as well with skills and training and high-value jobs to give people that opportunity. So that really is an overall theme around, and then we match that up with policies including particularly strengthening our healthcare system. Our Medicare system is very important. That was front and centre in the campaign. People trust us. They know that we are a party that believe in healthcare through just having your Medicare card, a universal health system. And our opponents really went back into grievance and we were able to point towards as well economic management. We produced 2 budget surpluses in our first term, the first time that had happened for a couple of decades. So we also emphasised the progressive patriotism idea as well, that we could go the Australian way. We didn't need to look to others for a pattern. We wanted to stand up for our own national interests, and that meant engagement in our region as well.
Thank you so much. We will also return to the discussion of progressive patriotism, but I wanted to ask you, Madam Prime Minister, in your time in office, how are you seeing meeting this moment for the people of Iceland?
So I guess it's different when you come into government having been in opposition before, because a big part of what you're doing, especially because since I took over the party, there was a big shift in sort of focus. We went back to core social democracy, focus on housing, economy, not trying to run after identity politics. But I mean, a core in our messaging coming into government is delivery relatively quickly. I mean, to be honest, I mean, the voter out there knows, they're smart, they understand that hard, structural changes, they take time. But there are moments, I think, where you can prove that you're there for the right reasons. I mean, we already put together a ministerial committee, for example, to revamp the building of nursing homes, and we just put people in a room and we didn't let them leave until they figured it out. And there were all these issues between the municipalities, between the government, between private companies, where somebody had got pissed off or something had got stuck in the system and they just allowed it to get that way. And so we managed to push that off and get that going pretty quickly. I will say we did also have a good moment, which I think really strengthened the government, which is that even though we campaigned on these bread and butter economic policy welfare issues, there has been a historical struggle in Iceland when it comes to our resources, especially our fisheries. We have a very profitable fisheries system, but the quota holders, they've retained much of the resource rents, and a large proportion of our citizens find this an unfair situation to be in. And so one of the first things we did was raise the resource rents, and we pushed for a new bill in Parliament, and we ended up getting filibustered by the opposition, not for days, but for weeks. And we stuck with it. And it led us to leave behind certain other things that we couldn't follow through on, but we stuck with it, and we ended up actually breaking up the filibuster with what some have called a nuclear button that we have in Parliament, but I would say is a democracy button, because the opposition is supposed to have an opinion, not to govern the country. And I think people thought we wouldn't do it. And it set an example that we were able to fulfill something in our first 6 months. So if you can deliver on a few things and people see that you have your heart in the right place and you're willing to go against that type of opposition, I think it gave a lot of people hope.
Prime Minister Starmer, thank you again for your remarks. And really, many countries around the world are facing a situation where there's a real rise of right-wing populism, and in some of the centrist parties, even centrist-right parties, are kind of falling away. In this context, how does the center-left, how do progressives meet the moment and actually capture a strong majority?
Well, I think for us, the context, certainly for the last election, was an electorate, a public, who, since the 2008 crash, hadn't seen their living wages, their living standards rise for many, many years. Totally flat. Their public services had got worse and worse to the point of decimation. And there'd been a massive drop-off in trust in politics for a whole bunch of reasons. So this led to quite a strong sense of disenchantment. And if you think about the 2008 crash to last year, that's 16 years. So anyone who was maybe in their 20s, late 20s, would have gone through to their early 40s not feeling they were materially progressing in the way that they would have expected in their lives, not seeing their public services fit for purpose, and losing faith in politics as an answer to that. That's why the change slogan that we had at the election was so powerful, because people said, I want that to change, I want to break this cycle. And therefore, what we're trying to do is to come in, and what I was alluding to earlier, this national renewal, is not just about fixing the problems, somehow taking them back to where we were, pre-08, pre-2010, whatever it may be, but building something better and different as you renew. So to take an example, our economy hasn't grown materially since 2008. It's been flat-lining. We need to get economic growth. That is the number one mission of the government. But it's got to be growth that is felt in every part of the country. It can't be a line on a graph, and it can't be growth in some parts of the country. It's got to be in every single part, which is why we've worked really hard on things like inward investment, record inward investment in the first year of the Labour government, and then a big top-up last week with the US state visit. But that has to be identified as to the places it's going in, to Hartlepool, into the various different, the Clyde. It's got to be place-based, and people need to see it's in my region, economic growth everywhere. Because I think for progressives, for social democrats, we for too long lost our way. We thought that redistribution was the only thing that mattered for fairness. You create wealth and then you redistribute, and that's a one-word answer for too many of our communities. It isn't. They want the pride to stand on their own 2 feet. They want the wealth to be in their community. The stuff we did yesterday in Pride in Place is really important, because what we said there was, here's a pot of money for your place, because frankly, you've been overlooked for too long, and you will decide what that money is spent on. So you're not coming cap in hand to Whitehall for somebody in Whitehall to tell you. It's your decision. Same with our public services. We've got to rebuild our National Health Service, would be the touchstone for us. But we can't simply take it back to where it was. It's got to be an NHS fit for the future. It's got to change as we go forward. So there's this question of how you deliver and what renewal means in substance. And then the other part, which is really important, is that certainly in the UK now we're at a crossroads. We have got a right-wing proposition that we've not had in this country before. We've gone on for decades with elections which are basically either a Labour government or a Conservative government, pitched usually pretty much on the centrepiece of politics, the centre ground of politics. So, but now we face a very different proposition with Reform and Nigel Farage, and so the battle of our times is between patriotic national renewal in the way I've described under a Labour government, which is capable of expressing who and what we are as a country accurately and in a way where people feel they're valued and they belong, and that we can actually move forward together, versus something which is turning into a toxic divide. That march that we had here 2 weeks ago in London, in Whitehall, that sent shivers through the spines of many of our communities well away from London, not just those in the immediate vicinity. So there's a battle for the soul of this country now as to what sort of country do we want to be, because that toxic divide, that decline with reform, it's built on a sense of grievance politics, identifying something real for sure, but relying on the problem existing in order for their politics to persist. And it's a very different choice. The choice before the electorate here at the next election is not going to be the traditional Labour versus Conservative. It's why I've said the Conservative Party is dead. Centre-right parties in many European countries have withered on the vine, and the same is happening in this country. It's a different proposition, and therefore it becomes a binary argument as to the future of our country, and it actually becomes bigger than Labour. It's about all of those that genuinely believe in the patriotism that I think is the heart of what we are as a country. So for us, it's about battling with repairing the damage that was done under the last government, which was huge, but rebuilding in a way which embraces and takes on the battle for the soul of the country, because we're going to face a very different election next time to any of the elections we fought in the United Kingdom for a very, very long time. And we need to be, that's why I think, certainly why I want this to be out as an open fight now between Labour and Reform. And I'll be majoring on this on my conference speech next week.
Thank you so much for that. Just to build on that, on those comments, Prime Minister Albanese, you referenced this a little bit, but I think what the Prime Minister Starmer is talking about is that conservative parties or far-right parties are offering a significant level of disruption, a significant change, and then we have to be drivers of an alternative, not basically go back to the status quo, but really drive an alternative vision of change. It seems like your election, you were able to do that by really having enough trust with voters. But how do you deal with that sort of competition of ideas, and how are you doing that now?
I think one of the things that you've got to say is that change happens, and get that across, not pretend that things can just stay the same. But the governments have a role in shaping change, otherwise change will shape the country without agency, if you like. And you've got to bring people with you on that journey of change. So climate change is front and centre. Our opposition at the moment are going back into a debate over whether it exists or not, basically, over whether they'll continue to support net zero by 2050. And we're saying climate change is real. This is how you have to act. Get ahead of it and bring people with you on that journey, I think, is really important. I think also that you need trust. My party and our Conservatives had both replaced sitting Prime Ministers a number of times, and that disruption annoyed people. People were like, what's the system? So one of the things that we did at the same time was to produce, I think, a stable government going forward as well, and to have the first time we've had a PM re-elected for over 2 decades. There have been 7 different results from 7 different elections. And so able to say that trust and to fulfil the commitments. So we were very disciplined about doing what we said we would do. There was one exception, which was we changed tax cuts that were built in to deliver for lower middle income earners, and we said we needed to do that. We owned it. I went to our National Press Club and said, this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it, because of the pressures that were on cost of living. So we were relentless about bringing things back to cost of living pressures, which was a global phenomenon. Global inflation was there as well. So, we had a 6 in front when we were elected and rose to 7, and we have now got it down within the band of with a 2 in front. And we did that without sacrificing people, and we did that as a distinction. So employment's strong, over 1 million jobs created in our system, unemployment's 4.2, and real wages increasing. So we said, we'll get inflation down, but in a way that doesn't leave people behind. And since the election in May, we've been really ruthless as well about delivering on the things that we took to the election so that we could, again, fulfil that trust that people want to see. So we've cut student debt, increased paid parental leave, an increase in the minimum wage, paid prac for people studying to be nurses or teachers. We've done energy bill relief, a whole range of changes that we said we would do, we took to the election, and we've implemented, most of them, those cost of living measures in the first period, because that's what people want. If you can't relate it back to making a difference to people's lives, then some of the culture war issues and those things can come to the fore. Our opponents are going down those rabbit holes, and I think they're a cul-de-sac. They don't actually lead anywhere. Whereas if you are ruthlessly concentrating on making a difference to people's lives that they can see, then you can talk about the broader issues as well, that you might want to talk about, those longer term changes of equity and broader issues about Australia's place in the world and those issues.
Prime Minister Carney, you face special circumstances in Canada, given your neighbour to the south, and let me just apologize. And so how are you, just building on the Prime Minister's remarks about delivering and how delivery creates trust, how do you see that in the context of Canada?
Yeah, we all have special circumstances in our own way, I suppose. So, and I'm going to pick up what Prime Minister Albanese just said. It starts with delivering directly for the situation people are in, and also draw a bit on what Keir was saying, which is, the reality of what you inherited, going 15 years without real wages, without people getting ahead. Like, the last time that happened was the middle of the 19th century. Karl Marx was writing the Communist Manifesto in the British Library. I mean, there's a connection here. So you've got to deliver real wage growth first and foremost. And so, similar to in Australia, slightly different measures. First thing we did is we cut taxes for the middle class. We cut taxes for 22 million Canadians. Boom, right away. First thing we did, we cut a tax effectively for young Canadians when they're buying their first time home, cut taxes on carbon, which was also the direct carbon tax, which had become a divisive issue. It was in textbook a good policy, but a divisive issue. So very tangible things that directly affected affordability, cost of living. Those are fiscal choices, but they had to be made, and they're delivering, and Canadians are beginning to feel first that. Second, building in a way that is as inclusive as possible. I'm going to give another example, which is we need to double the pace of home building in Canada. Okay, there's lots of ways you can try to do that, but the core, we're starting from the deeply affordable end of the spectrum and building on out with some interventions from government, but driving through the private sector. The point on this is it's by Canadian, so it's Canadian technology, Canadian lumber, which America is keeping out for the moment, he says, hopefully, and Canadian technology factory built and other aspects of that. But it's an affordability point. It's progressive in its approach because it is lower carbon in construction, it's lower carbon in operation, it's cheaper, and it fills a housing need for half of our households that we're just simply not being addressed. So all of what I've said has actually nothing to do with U.S. tariff policy, and it goes back to something I said earlier, and we say over and over again. We have learned the lesson that we need to be, we use the expression, masters in our own home. We were over-reliant on one trading partner. We can address it by building at home and diversifying, we'll get to it, I'm sure, with like-minded trading partners around the world. That's not everybody in the world, but countries that share our values, share our commitment to open markets, And again, that can more than compensate for what's happening elsewhere. And the key thing is it gives people agency. We're in charge. We're not reliant on a decision that's taken outside our border.
Madam Prime Minister, you just gave us an extremely concrete example of delivering. And I just wonder if you wanted to offer more ideas about rebuilding that sense of social trust and by delivering, and how you have a different ethos in government than your predecessors.
So there was a big change in government when we took over, because this is the second time in history where the Conservatives are not the biggest party. And the last time when the Social Democrats were in government, it was after the crisis. It was a very difficult time, so sort of the room for renewal or policy drive was very limited. And so there was a big mandate for change, but at the same time, I think there was still this sense of disbelief that a Social Democratic Party could sort of have control of the economy, do things properly. So one of the first things that we did was to make sure that people knew that we were taking the economy very seriously. We put on a new fiscal rule, which excluded investment, and said, okay, there are limits to how much, fiscal can grow. Mark likes this. We've discussed this. We discussed this. Yeah. We're gonna be balancing the budget. We're gonna be balancing the budget by 2027. And we started out by asking for ideas from the public on tidying up ideas. How do you tidy up with the government? And a big part of that is, it might sound like it's for show, but at the end of the day, a big driver of distrust, I think, in politics today, and I feel this especially because I didn't grow up in politics, I'm relatively new in all of this, is that people just feel like they're not listened to, like their ideas aren't good. And most of the times, they have pretty good ideas. And so we collected all these ideas, and it was also a signal to the public that we, despite being a center-left-led government, we like the government, we like systems, we support welfare. We're not watchdogs of the system. It's not, the right tends to say the government is in our way, it needs to be broken down. We would say, okay, there are parts of it that need to be disrupted. And so we're okay by going into systems change, by talking about tidying up, doing things better, even though we might be wanting to spend more on welfare. And I think that gave us an aura of sort of cleaning up in a way. There's 3 women who are in this coalition. So the leaders of all the parties are women. And we just have this aura of taking care of business. And I think it's really given us a good platform of then doing all sort of the progressive ideas that we need to do in housing and welfare, because we have ownership of what we're doing. So this has been a big focus of us. I also want to say, for example, when it comes to building, Iceland is an energy-rich country, but one thing you might not know is that over the past couple of years or even a decade, there's been this backlash against power, against harnessing nature. And, even in my party, we have people who want to conserve nature. I want to conserve nature. It's very important. But there needs to be a balance between ramping up, building up, getting growth. And we've been very critical of the regulations that have been set that we feel like is not promotive to growth. So we're doing these little small things that show that we're not just there to spend everybody's money. But at the same time, we have a righteousness check like we did with the fisheries. We're hitting back on the fisheries fees. We're getting income in, we're getting taxes in, and we're not just focusing on cutting. So I think that's definitely given us a lot of trust. And then I will just say at the end of the day, people vote for you to govern, to make difficult decisions. They don't want to always hear that everything you're doing is easy, that they appreciate it. If you say no to some things, and then you say, this is going to be difficult for a year or 2, but I'm sure it's going to be better, because it gives you trust. So we've been pretty clear on that this is a longer-term project, and I think it's given us credibility, at least for now. Let's see what happens in a year or so.
I just want to pick up on some of what Mark was saying, because on the one hand, we've got the domestic situation here in the UK, as I described, a different political divide that's opened up. But that's happening at the same time as much more instability and conflict around the world. The global situation is as fragile as I think many of us have known it. I have to say, when the Berlin Wall came down, I didn't think that I'd see Russian tanks going across European borders in my lifetime. I really didn't. I mean, yet we've seen it. That conflict is not just about the sovereignty of Ukraine. It is about the ambition of Putin and our values, our freedoms. It's already impacted hugely on energy prices, etc., here in the United Kingdom. And it has shattered the idea that the comfortable peace dividend that we have enjoyed for years is here necessarily to stay, and therefore we have to rise to this moment. And on security and defence, we're in a different era. There is no doubt about that. You can feel that all across Europe and beyond. Countries are spending more on defence. And we have set up the Coalition of the Willing. That is a group of like-minded countries focused in the first instance on how do we provide the security that will be needed if there's a ceasefire in Ukraine, but equally, and really important for me, as a vehicle to ensure that the countries in the coalition are willing, particularly the European countries, step up on defence and security in a way we haven't. Because for years we've pretty well neglected this. We haven't been in the right place. We've assumed that the peace dividend would last for much longer. And now we've got to step up into that space. And so Coalition of the Willing, for me, is about, yes, Ukraine, but it's about a bigger argument about how we step up on defence and security in this new era. And we have to combine this with what's going on at home. So at home, you've got how do you deliver on the real things that matter to people day in, day out, whilst at the same time attending to the international issues, which are huge. And going back to Mark's point, it's not just defence and security. Trade and the economy in our world is changing. It's moving to a different place. You can have your own view on tariffs. You may think they're good, bad, or indifferent, but the fact is they're here. President Trump believes in them, uses them, and we have to understand that. It's a profound belief that he has about the way he wants his economy to be reshaped. We can commentate on that, or we can understand we're living in a different world, and therefore we have to react to that, which means being much clearer about, in my view, the role of the state in our own countries, working with our industries, our sectors, so that it's not just a sort of free-for-all, market knows best, but actually much more focused and directed, but also how do we lower trade inhibitors across like-minded countries, which is why we've pushed so hard to get our trade deal with the US, particularly on relation to tariffs on things that matter to this country. Car manufacturing will be the best example of that, but also the trade deal that we did with India, which had been tried for many years, and moving closer to the EU through the EU-UK reset, is part of re-establishing the UK on the world stage, which we had to do. It's very important, but is also recognising on defence and security and on trade and the economy, we are living in a different, much more difficult world than the world we were living in just a few years ago. And therefore, you've got the remaking of domestic politics in a world where on defence and security and trade and the economy, we are in a new era. And bringing that together is hugely important. Not easy, because there's always this tension as to what happens internationally versus what happens at home. I have to say, I don't think we've been in a time where the domestic impact of what's happening internationally has been as profound and as direct as it is at the moment. What happens in the rest of the world is having a direct impact on the United Kingdom in a way that wasn't the case, 5, 10, 15 years ago. And it is It's a very profound challenge that we all face, which is why it's important to have gatherings like this, where we can come, share our experience, exchange our thoughts, and ask the question, how does social democracy respond to some of this?
Yeah. Prime Minister Carney, did you want to respond?
Yeah, I'll just add to that very quickly. Our core policy, our core message in the election campaign, our core policy now it's called Canada Strong. Okay, we're building Canada Strong in a variety of ways. And our foreign policy, to link it to foreign policy, has traditionally been a value-based foreign policy. Okay. We're realizing that it's not just the strength of our values, but the value of our strength. Mm-hmm. And how do we build that strength? It's making choices at home in terms of defense and security, and it's marrying that strength with like-minded partners. And what we're living through, all of us, what we're living through is not a transition, it's a rupture. Mm-hmm. It's a big change in the trading system, and we're not going back. Nostalgia is not a strategy there. Big change in geopolitical risk. We have agency, but we have to build strength at home, find those like-minded partners, bring together. And in doing so, we deliver for our citizens, but also it gives a confidence and a purpose to the country that is empowering.
And I think that speaks to the patriotism that you talked about. So just as we're closing, if you have a few more words, Prime Minister Albanese, about the topic you mentioned, which is progressive patriotism.
Yeah, that I think on the range of issues, be it trade, that means standing up for, in our case, Australia's national interest. We're also aiming to diversify our trade interests, and from us, the driver of that in part was that there were restrictions from China, our major trading partner, so we've reached out particularly to ASEAN, to the growing economies to our north, but also the other partnerships that we have as well. Migration is a big issue. When it comes to migration issues, one of the theme of our approach is you can be strong on borders without being weak on humanity. So we have strong border controls through Operation Sovereign Borders. We've continued, but at the same time we've increased the number of asylum seekers who we take. We abolished temporary protection visas to give people that security to fully participate in society. People who'd been in Australia some for more than a decade. Yeah. They weren't going back anywhere. But to really emphasise that Australian values are there. I think there are attempts by some on the far right to own nationalism, and so it's a matter of not being nativist about it, but being proud of who we are and what we're achieving. And Australian society has the oldest continuous culture on earth in First Nations people, but we also are a multicultural society as well, who've welcomed people from all over the world. We're all either migrants or descendants of migrants, except for First Nations people. So we have a Prime Minister called Albanese and a Senate leader called Wong. And that's who we are as a modern society. And I think that is really important as well, that we're embracing who we are and being proud of it.
And just finally, Madam Prime Minister, as you see this conversation, how do you see this idea of sort of progressive patriotism?
I mean, speaking for Iceland at least, can you imagine? If you're an Icelandic person, you have to be proud. You're there in the middle of the ocean and you're your own country. Icelanders are very proud. And we have this strange relationship with the outside world because we're so addicted to it, but at the same time, we have our own language. We've done really well for ourselves, despite a lot of reasons why we may not have. What I will say is that you get really far ahead when it comes to trying to unite people behind, whether it's the flag or patriotism or the nation, by showing people respect. And I do think, and I'm sure everyone here in this room can agree, that center-left social democracy for some time, starting having a conversation too much up here. They were talking at people, not with them. They weren't talking about concrete matters. And what is patriotic is meeting people where they're at, understanding that your mandate comes from the people, that you're not supposed to tell people how they feel, but you're supposed to experience how they feel and try to run based on that. And so, to me, patriotism has meant trying to join the country together, all of Iceland, not just urban-centric, very globalist mindset, even though it's very important that we have international relationships. We just need to be able to get to a level where we're having real conversations with people. And at the end of the day, people want togetherness, they want humanity, they want to be kind to their neighbor, but they just want the systems to work. So they want you to go to work and disrupt those systems if they need to work. You don't even have to talk that much about it. Just do it. And, you know, at the end of the day, that's what we're all going to be measured on. Are we building those nursing homes? Did those house builds go up? Do you have health care? It's not just the rhetoric. So, again, we'll see where we're at in a couple of years, but I think we can do it.
Right. Just do it is a great motto for how democracies can deliver. I want to thank this incredible panel, and I have to say, the future is bright when you have leaders who are focused on delivering. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And I think we are going...
Well, don't run away just yet. We're on to our next panel, which is about meeting the moment. Sounds good on a summit stage, meeting the moment, but meeting it with what exactly? People do not want slogans. They want proof. And that's what this panel will explore if you do stay with us. So on the stage now, we'll have Governor J.B. Pritzker of Illinois, USA, a Democratic governor who has made state-level progressive leadership central to America's political debates. We'll also have Magdalena Andersson, the former Prime Minister of Sweden, who steered her country through crisis, and moderating we'll have Elly Schlein, leader of Italy's Democratic Party and Member of Parliament. But do stay with us as they join the stage now.
So we should have... Okay, we can start. Thanks a lot for the invitation. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here and to be with GB. I'm Elly Schlein, the leader of the Partito Democratico in Italy, opposition party right now, with an extreme right government of Giorgia Meloni.
And I suppose I'm Governor J.B. Pritzker, and I'm in the opposition party, but not in my state. I am the governor.
So it's particularly important to be here on stage after three prime ministers that I must thank for their leadership in these days, also in New York, on Palestine, and I thank them for the strength that they have shown in that discussion. In Italy, we are worried about the international situation, GB, and I wanted to ask you to start off, what is your position on how Trump is dealing with the historical friendship between the European Union and the US? I mean, we must not give up our transatlantic alliance and friendship, even now when Trump started a commercial war towards our countries and towards the European Union that is damaging strongly our economies. So what is your position on this, on what Trump is doing with the historical partners and allies?
Well, my observation is that the challenges that the Trump administration has brought to the transatlantic alliance are multifaceted. Let's start with the economic relationships and then move to the defense relationships. And we cannot afford to lose either one. Our relationship from a defense perspective has been, I think, severely impacted by the shifting sands of the United States engagement in the Ukraine-Russia war. It was my understanding and my belief that the United States should stand in solidarity with a country whose borders have been invaded, and that our advocacy should be for a democracy that is being put to the test by a rival, indeed an enemy of the United States. And it is